Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody inside and outside the ballpark. My name is NovedPlayer, and welcome to episode 54 of the Noved Notes podcast, where we talk about many different types of creators and communities inside of the platform. With me today, I have a world and asset developer working with an amazing comedy community known as Failed to Render. We have PablosCorner. Pablo, welcome on the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, of course. It's
Very
lovely
cool
to have
place.
you. Thank you. Shout out xCirrex. But yeah, so for the general listening audience, what exactly do you do inside of VRChat?
So I mainly do world development. Most of the stuff I've created recently have been like venues for live entertainment. One of the big things so far has been the Failed to Render Comedy Club. I created this place called the Brainwash Cafe, which actually was based off a real place in San Francisco that closed down in 2017. And somehow, some way, we were able to kind of get the blessing to kind of recruit, to kind of like have the Brainwash in VRChat. Funny enough, it didn't actually start out that way. In another platform that we do our shows on, Meta Horizon Worlds, we kind of had the Brainwash Comedy Club, which was kind of more of a how do I say, looser kind of original place. It had some features, but like it was mostly an original creation, and it was fine for what it was, right? But I kind of just like thought to myself, I was like, maybe I could like recreate this place, but like make it like accurate, you know what I mean? Like make it like real good in like VRChat, So I just went up to, Kyle Render, who's the one who runs the club, and I said, hey, like, I would like to be able to like recreate this place, but like for real, because I've been doing like a little bit of research on the real place, right, and just seeing what it looked like, and it was quite the task, like I had to go through a lot of Google Maps, like pictures and like street views and all that stuff, and even just Google Images, just to like see if there was any like areas that like Google Maps didn't cover. But if you go there, like, and there's been some people that have been to the real life place and they've come to this and they're like, wow, this place is like almost spot on accurate. And like I've had to take some creative liberties, for things that I just couldn't recreate, or just stuff that I didn't think was really worth recreating. But for the most part, like, they'll say it's pretty spot on. So that's kind of like one of the biggest things. But even then, even before that, I just kind of dabbled in like making like wrestling arenas, just because I'm a pro wrestling fan. I don't know if the shirt gives it away, but but I like pro wrestling, so I was like, I want to create wrestling arenas in VRChat, just because why not? And I managed to port like stuff from like the WWE 2K games, and like I managed to port that into VRChat, so you could just walk into this like full NBA size arena and just like see all like this huge WWE type setup. It's like, wow, like, and this was like years ago, but yeah. Those are some of the things, at least the things that, I can at least call my own,
Fair enough. No, I mean, that's really cool. So I guess kind of one of the first things I want to ask, so what got you, into VRChat in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start like even before that, right? I was going to college, or I was starting to go to college, and I wanted to do animation because that was what I was into. I wanted to, I watched stuff like Ed's World, and I was like, oh my god, I want to, make internet cartoons, or maybe even more, just like that, right? So, there was a program in my college where like you could basically just do that. But the thing was, they also had another track in their program where you could make like games. And like as I was like sitting there talking with my counselor, I was like thinking to myself, I was like I wonder if I could get further by doing like game development instead of like cartoons, So like I thought about it, and then I realized, okay, I think I want to do game development because I honestly thought I had more of a future doing that sort of thing, So I go in there, and this was like maybe around 2017-ish. I graduated high school around this time, so yeah. So I'm just doing my thing, and then all of a sudden, I'm on the internet, and I see this thing. Ugandan Knuckles. I think a lot of people have seen this, and like I've seen all the videos and the memes, and I'm like, oh my god, like what is this on? And then like I see it's like VRChat, and I'm like, huh, Okay. And I was already like starting to get interested in VR as well because I was watching creators like Jacksepticeye who had like the DK1, like that headset, and he was just
Yep.
like going through like the roller coasters and all that stuff, and I was like, wow, like this sounds like an amazing medium, and it's like I want to get into that, like when there's a product we can actually buy. And like I didn't have the PC headsets at first. I had to go through like I had to like climb the mountain, right? I had to start off with like the Google Cardboards. I'm sure you've used those once
Once or twice.
twice.
Yeah, once
Regrettably,
or twice,
maybe even. I don't know. But then, I eventually graduated. Funny enough, one of my Google Cardboard headsets was from a Lowe's store. Like they had a vending machine where you could literally just get a Google Cardboard headset and had those like Lowe's branded. And I was like, yeah, look at me, I got VR, yay!
That's funny.
And as far as like, yeah. So, and funny enough, I think one of the first like social things that that you could do on there, I think, was going on Altspace, like the mobile version or whatever. Like it was like very primitive at that time, right? And then eventually I would graduate to the Gear VR, for the Samsung phones. It definitely felt like more of a step up, but it was still kind of like ultimately the same thing. Mm-hmm. You could just do a little bit more. It was a little more integrated, so that helped. But it was kind of the same. I still tried Altspace because that was the only thing I really knew about at the time, right? And then eventually, like, I finally got my first PC VR headset. It was the Windows mixed reality ones. I think the first one I ever got was an HP one. I didn't really like it that much, so I returned it, and I eventually got the Lenovo one instead, and that one was better. At least comparatively, right?
Right.
And
sure.
then I found this game called Rec Room. You're probably familiar with that too. And I was on there for like a couple of years. And then, after a couple of years, VR, going back to when I first heard of VRChat, I thought I was like, you know what? I kind of want to like actually try out VRChat, right? So I go on there, and this was pre-Udon, so it was only just SDK2 stuff. And at least at the time, from my perspective, it didn't seem like there was a lot going on. So I just kind of like stopped. Like I didn't really go on that much afterwards. I went back to Rec Room. And then after that, I started feeling like I was growing out of Rec Room because this was at the time when they were starting to introduce like their memberships and like more kids were coming in. And, like they were releasing it on like flat screen consoles and stuff like that, and even iPhone. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm growing out of this game. I think I might go to VRChat. But here's the thing too, right? I think that what made it more appealing for me to come back was the fact that Udon did come out. It was a thing that we could start using. So I was like, okay, well, I guess like now there's like actually things to do, I guess, because I was looking for like games, like game experiences on there. So, once I got back on there and I saw the games, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. You know what I mean? Like this is completely changed. But I didn't really start developing stuff on there until I encountered this recreation of a retail store that used to exist back then. And this was a place I used to shop at too. I was like, wow, this is in VRChat. This is amazing. You know what I mean? So I wanted to like see if I could help, right? Because I was like starting to like get into 3D modeling more and like texturing and stuff like that. So I asked the person who ran it at the time. I was like, hey, I really like this. I would really like to help. And they didn't know who I was, right? It's like, who's this guy, right?
Right.
So I kind of had to prove it, right? So I felt like the best way I could do that was just model something. And I think I modeled a paint can. That was like the first thing I modeled. And I just showed that to them, and they were like, whoa. I was like, that's actually pretty good. And, it was good for the time. I know now I could do better, but for the time, it was also better than what they had before, which was just like, it was just like a Unity cylinder that had like a literally just a picture of a paint can. So, I at least like properly textured it, even though it wasn't like the ideal workflow back then. But it was still better, right? So eventually I got brought on to start like modeling props and stuff like that. And it was going good. And then there was this other story that was kind of like in the way, like, in the same group, right? That kind of seemed like something was going on. But once I was inside, right, like I kind of realized nothing was actually going on with it. It was just kind of like a showpiece, I guess. So someone kind of floated around the idea of like, hey, why doesn't Pablo just, take on this project of like actually making this a real thing? And I was like, you know what? That actually sounds like a good idea. Because originally I wanted to renovate like the original store because it was starting to look a little right. But once that opportunity came up, I was like, you know what? Why not, right? Like this would end up becoming my first big project ever, And so like throughout the year, like I'm just working on it, and then like we have other people that help out too, but I put a lot of work into it. And like one of the big things I wanted, and this wasn't really like emphasized back then, but like I really wanted this store to like be cross compatible. Because this was around the time when the Quest 1 was a thing, and like more people were starting to come in, and I'm like I need this place to be cross compatible, because this is what's going to make this place like pop. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be popular. And lo and behold, we eventually get it working on Quest, even if it's not perfect and optimized. But it was, what could you really do for Quest 1, right? But it was good enough, like people could get in or whatever. And time goes by, and that place ends up becoming like the most popular map between all the other maps that they had, and it just ended up just essentially becoming like the new flagship. And like it kind of like blew my mind, because I was like, wow, like it's insane, you know what I mean? And like I knew my skills were getting better because I was creating better looking stuff, and like my workflow was becoming more optimized, so like I could get stuff done quicker while also making it look better, you know what I mean? And also just not going crazy from doing it like the more manual ways that I did it, right? So here's the crazy thing too, right? Well, actually, you know what? I think I'll just leave it there, because I feel like I'll talk your ear off.
No, you're good. You're all good. Well, no, that's really cool that you've kind of vested yourself with different platforms and different types of creations and stuff. It's really
Yeah.
cool to see a creator kind of branch out into that aspect. Well, I guess kind of to go into that, because you kind of already touched base on like what got you started with like game development and stuff, and starting that due process and getting you into VR. So I guess kind of to
Right.
go into that, because you've been to different spaces. What was like you mentioned that you got in Knuckles and everything, but what was like one of the first worlds that you found very fond of, like when you first joined VRChat?
Let's see. I think funny enough, I think like the first world that really got to me was like, I think it was like a Flappy Bird like world, where like you were basically just like, you were the Flappy Bird and you had to like get through the pipes, and I was like, oh my god, this is actually a game. Like I can like I'm the bird, you know what I mean? So like it was really interesting, and that it made me realize, hey, like like I definitely see myself being on this platform a whole lot more, especially since I was already like on the way out of a rec room, you know what I mean? So I'm definitely glad that I kind of got in at the time I did.
Fair. No, yeah, and I mean you picked a good era to come into, to say the least. With all the updates that have happened since then,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
definitely a crazy thing. So I guess kind of to go into more specifics, because obviously you've made different worlds like you're already mentioning. So let's kind of go into that a little bit. So you did make two different wrestling maps. You had made the VRChat 2K SmackDown, as well as the Fantasy
Yeah.
Super Cosplay Wrestling, which if I remember correctly
Yeah.
was an old one at Florida SuperCon, if I remember correctly.
It was, yeah. They're still going on too.
Are
Yeah.
they really? Dang, fair enough. I might have to
Yeah, they're
catch up
actually
on that.
they've been going to all the different they specifically do it under the GalaxyCon conventions.
Fair enough.
So funny enough with that, right, is that like there was kind of like a brief period of time where they weren't coming here, mainly just because at the time Florida SuperCon was being sold off to ReedPop, which is like a company or a corporation that like owns a couple of like big, like big brand like conventions, right? So they tried making it work, but like they just weren't like bringing them in as much, and then like they just stopped bringing them in. So we just had like a couple years where they just weren't coming in, and then um eventually like there were times where they did bring them in, like just kind of like as one-offs for like that year. But this year in particular, actually, as I'm recording this next Saturday, not this upcoming, but next Saturday, I'm going to a convention called Animate Miami, and they are actually bringing it over there because it's under GalaxyCon, and that's who they primarily do those shows for. So, and it's going to be in a convention center that they've always pretty much done like their smaller cons at. So it almost feels like it's like I'm going back to the past. You know what I mean? But with that map in particular, I was like, and that map is actually based off when they did it at SuperCon. I think like maybe in 2019. I'm not sure if the map description tells what year it was that I did it, that happened, but I think it was 2019.
We'll have it on the screen.
I mean, it had to have been because it was before COVID.
Fair. Yeah.
So, you know, I was like, you know what? Like, I want to remake this just to see if I can. So it actually started off as just a Blender only project. Like, I just wanted to make renders out of it. But I was like, you know what? Like, I could put this, I could bring this into Unity and like actually make something with it, you know? So I like started bringing it in, lighting it up, and then like all for the wrestling stuff, I used like WWE 2K like models and textures. You know, like of course I put my own spin on it with like the decals and the rope colors and all that stuff. And the stage was original. I did create that myself. But it was just really cool seeing it in action. Like when I actually put the headset on, I was there because I was like, wow, man! Like I almost feel like I'm at the con. You know, but there was some little
nostalgia
enhancements here and there, just because I was like, you know, there could be some improvements to the setup. So I put my own little embellishments on it, but otherwise, like it's what you'd probably expect it to look like. It's pretty cool, but they don't like it kind of looks a little different nowadays, like in terms of like the branding and the setups and all that stuff. So it's, you know, it's a little old school set, at least by these days.
No, but yeah. No, well, that's cool. Like I know a few people, some of my homies and some of the people who also view my stuff, they love wrestling. We've had a few wrestling fanatics come on. Chris Connie and Impact Sona, both are huge wrestling fanatics. Love them both to death. Well, that's really cool. Like, it's definitely cool to see how many people are like still interested in the whole, like, you know, wrestling, whether it's like WWE or, you know, all the other different brands as well. I guess kind of to move further into the timeline a bit, because this next question actually does involve one of your other things outside of VR. So obviously you had also made the VR world, or VR Noma world to be specific.
Oh yeah.
So I guess kind of, you know, because I have the Wii, but I've never fully looked into that channel for I know it's Japanese exclusive. So what exactly is VR Noma? I might be saying that wrong.
So VR Noma, you actually got it right. So VR Noma is basically a VRChat port of the Wii Noma like little room, right? With the table. And basically in the original channel, basically its only real purpose was that you watched videos from like different companies and you rated them, right? Like when you were done watching them, but you'd also get like a lot of entertaining stuff too. Like they had like Pokemon, like cooking videos, like English, like teaching videos. There was even like one series they had on there where like they're like people refurbishing things for like people in Japan. It's like really like cool, you know what I mean? But you know, with WeLink, which is essentially the service that has revived it. And sorry if I brought it up before you questioned me about it.
Yeah, go for it. You're good.
I figured it was a good segue, right? But
stole my
but
segue.
You know, they revived these services. I'm so sorry. But basically they revived these online services that Nintendo shut down years ago. Originally there was two separate services. There was Reconnect 24, which kind of focused on just kind of like the international WeConnect 24 channels, and then there was WeLink, which focused more on the Japanese channels. But early last year, these services actually merged, and it ended up just becoming, you know, the WeLink brand ended up winning between the two. So, you know, now it's just WeLink, and now we encompass like all the WeConnect 24 channels, including the Japanese ones. So, you know, so the cool thing that we do with Wii Noma now is that, you know, we also have a new original series created by people in the team and even some people outside of the team. So now you can actually find new original content made specifically for the service. And the VR Noma room is basically just me being like, hey, I want to port this to VRChat. Let's just do it and make it, you know, I wanted it to look good too, right? Because like, Um, like when it comes to presentation, I at least want it to look as good as I possibly can, right? So it ended up kind of being like prophetic almost, because it's kind of like it's kind of the first thing I did, like getting into it. Like, I was like, hey guys, look, I ported this to to VRChat, and they're like, oh cool. But I think the thing that really got me into the team was there was a time period where like their patcher tool was like basically like not being maintained, and like something just went wrong, like it just stopped working, and like I just gained like a curiosity, like, hey, like could I reverse engineer this, because it was basically like a batch script, right? Like a .bat, or like a shell script if you're like on Mac OS or Linux. So I was like, I'm gonna look through these scripts and I'm gonna see how they work, and then I want to see if I can reprogram it in like a more like high level, like C sharp, right? Or so I just kind of started doing that, and then I eventually got it to the point where like it was working, because I actually found some libraries that like allowed me to, like, for example, to download whatever content I needed to, build these channel packages and all that stuff, and but also patch them at the same time. So that way when they were packed, it's like, okay, here's the modified channel that'll connect to, the WeLink service. And they were so impressed that they were just like, okay, bring him onto the team. So and it's kind of funny because at VCAT, just this past winter, 2024 VCAT, I actually had my own booth there, and I installed a little WeLink kiosk to the left side of it, and it just kind of showed you like a little video of like what services you could use again, like forecast channel, news channel, everybody votes channel.
I missed that one.
Everybody and the Japanese channel ones, We No Ma, the food channel, like the one you probably heard about this one. You maybe have seen on YouTube where it's like, oh, you can order pizza, on your Wii, and then it'll eventually show up to your house. I mean, it goes through Domino's. Yeah,
no,
you order your pizza on the food channel with our service, and it'll, you'll find your nearest Domino's, and it'll order through there, and it'll actually show up to your house.
What? I'm gonna have to try that one day. I have two Wiis. One is completely clean. One's completely modded, because I do love me some modded Smash Brawl and some other games. But
hey, get the WeLink service. It'll be worth it. But yes, and then there's like even other ones where it's like like you can make like little business cards with like your me on it, and like you can actually like you can have it like sent out to your email address so you can download it. And just a bunch of other cool stuff, man. Like there's a lot I could talk about, but I mean that's basically the crux of what that is.
No, fair enough. I mean, funny enough, because we're on the whole Nintendo subject, because you also do I know it's off VR, so it is a little bit of a tangent, but it's still a really cool thing. But I saw you also did like Mario 64 modding and stuff. So out of curiosity, what got you into that?
So, as a kid, I watched a lot of videos on a service called Google Videos. This was before Google bought YouTube.
Yep.
So, I'd end up finding like Mario 64 videos, and like I grew up with the GameCube, and my first Mario game was Mario Sunshine. So this was like, what? Another Mario game? What is this? Mm-hmm. And then, it looked older and like more primitive. I was like, wow, and it was just like people doing like speed runs, or even like these things, you probably heard them. They're called machinimas, where it's like, you got like, they make like little entertaining videos like with the game. And I was like watching that. And then YouTube became a thing, and then all that stuff just kind of moved on there. And then, when I heard that, when I found that people were like modding the game, there was like these really early, there's this one tool that everyone was using at the time. It was called Toadstool 64. And the only thing you could really do with it was you could move objects around, right? And like change them into different objects, and like you can also retexture like the base textures in the game. And people were making these like really primitive mods, and I wanted to do that, so that's what I tried doing. And didn't really make anything that I would put out, right? But eventually more advanced tools would come out where like you could actually replace levels like properly, and you can like put objects where they need to be, and like replace music and stuff like that. So I started doing that. And over time, like I was getting better at it, but there was these people that I've, gotten really well along with. And, it's like, hey, like what if we took our talents, right? Because, we were all good at different things. And we were like, why don't we come together so that we could make these awesome mods, right? And eventually, they agreed, and eventually we would become Team Cornersoft. So, we released just like a couple demos at the time. I was really big at the time. I was really big into like porting like games to other like to Super Mario 64. So it's like, oh, what if I took Sonic Adventure and put it in Super Mario 64, right? Like made a Super Mario 64 version of it, or like I don't know, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga for the Game Boy Advance. Like, what if I'd made a Super Mario 64 version of that? You know what I mean? So that's what I was trying to do, but kind of is how it is. Where like you're young and like you got things to do, and like you don't end up finishing projects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, but over the years, like we just kept doing these, like mods. And then something started. There's this YouTube channel, maybe you've heard of it. It's Simple Flips. He like he primarily did speedrunning back then, but now he's kind of like he's kind of more of a variety streamer, like where he like plays like games like Gmod, Trouble in Terrorist Town, and like he mainly a lot of people know him for like playing like Mario 64 ROM hacks, right? So eventually he started doing these competitions where you could win like actual cash prizes depending on how well you score, right? Because like the audience essentially voted like between like 1 to 10 on like what they thought of the mod like after the game was done. And I think that moment was really when we started taking ourselves even more seriously, and we wanted to make more original things. So one of my team members, Mel, he's very talented, he's very good at making art, and like just has a really like big grand vision for stuff. And him and another team member, Arctic Jaguar, like they've been kind of the driving forces for our more recent mods. I can at least list a couple of them, like what is it? Was it Mario versus WarioWare, which is basically a like, what if we took WarioWare and like made that work within Super Mario 64? Like you were playing mini games, right? But like it was in Mario 64. So we did that, and then there was another one we did, which was like kind of I think it had more of a grander vision, but like we had to kind of like we needed to have a more realistic scope to get it in time for the competition. But it's called Elise, and it's like a very original like mod where it's like you're playing as this character named Elise, and it's like she's like actually in a coma, right? And so it's like in the gameplay, like she's in her mind, right? And she's like going back through like life events and stuff like that, but it's like in a weird, it almost kind of like gets distorted, right? And like it just got such a positive reception that I've even heard people say that they would love to see standalone versions of this game. That's not a mod, right? Like it's its own game. And it's something that even to this day I'm still kind of like, man, like we really need to do this because I think it would work so well. But even after that, like we made some other really good mods like Balloon Slider Mania, because one of the themes was slides, right? Like Mario 64 slides. So they were like, hey, let's just go all the way with it, right? So like Balloon Slider Mania just became a thing, and like we were just getting so many compliments on it because it had such a professional and polished looking presentation that people almost just thought it was just like a real game at that point, but like in Mario 64. And like I'm really proud of where they've gone with Team Cornersoft, and we're not done. Like we still got a couple things up our sleeve, but for me personally, right? Like I've been more focused on VR stuff, but it's like I'm always there if they need me, right? But I've been kind of letting them kind of drive everything and like kind of create like all the really good stuff, and they've been killing it. So I'm really happy to see where they've been with it.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, that's really cool. Like I'm just enthralled with like how much you do when it comes to like the whole like modding and all that type of stuff. Like I mean, kudos.
Yeah, I've been in a lot of different places.
No, fair. I guess kind of moving on from that, because obviously there's a lot you could go into, but there's still much to talk about. So and after that one, came the Brainwash Cafe, if I remember correctly. That's when that world had finally been first uploaded.
Yeah.
And you kind of already mentioned how it was kind of based on the recreation of the actual location. So I guess kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask, because you'd had people see the real thing and come into VR and see it. I guess what was kind of some of the emotions like going through your head when you had people compare it to the real thing, because obviously it was a recreation, but like, what was some of the kind of the
Mhm.
emotions that went through your head when it was kind of validated?
Yeah, no, I just like I kind of felt like I was at a point where I was like, man, like I finally feel like I'm at a point where like I can really like be proud of like the work that I put. And it's not like I wasn't proud of like my previous stuff, but it was like this was my own place, right? Like that I built like entirely by myself, right? Like it wasn't for someone else or for a group, right? Like I mean, I guess it technically was, but in terms of like it was done from scratch. That's probably a better way to put it. Like I built it from scratch. It wasn't based off something that already existed, and I had to like fill in with like my own stuff. Like this was my own place, and like after like the however long I took to like put it together, even now I still don't consider it done. You know what I mean? Like I could always like add more things to it to like make it look even better, more features. Even just now, I recently installed an in-world timer for our open mic variant for failed to render, so that instead of us having to rely on our phones, we just have an in-world timer that we could just just start and set whatever.
Makes things easier.
So when people say like, "Wow, this looks just like the real thing," like it I think it just really validated everything that I've been going through to like get to that point, and just all of the work and effort and time that I spent, you know, getting that place to where it was. I felt really proud of myself. I was like, yes, man. I was like, that's what I wanted to hear. So I'm really happy with it now.
No, yeah, of course. I mean, kudos again, to making a world that's essentially a replica of an IRL place. Like, it's not an easy thing to say the least. Hello, everyone. Real quick, just want to pause the episode right here. I want to thank you all so much for the amazing support when it comes to the Noved Squad and the Noved Notes podcast. We are now officially in the creator economy, which you can kind of see right behind me. You can now officially tip the podcast, or if you're interested to do monthly subscriptions with more benefits and perks for the world and upcoming projects, feel free to check it out at the group page, Noved.6608 for the group page. Of course, if you're enjoying what you're watching, feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. But let's get back into the episode. Woo! It's, especially when the community itself's like, yeah, this is exactly what it is. Like, that's really cool. I couldn't imagine like getting that type of feedback. That's really cool. So I guess
Yeah.
kind of to go into that, now we're kind of getting more into the failed to render stuff. So I guess kind of for
Yeah.
the general listening audience, so what exactly do you do for failed to render?
So to be honest with you, I kind of wear a lot of hats in there. My primary thing is like I'm a world developer. I make the venues. Not all of them. Like some venues have been made before I was there. So our main club was developed by two developers named Cause and Christie. They go by Cause Christie XR. They made the original club in Altspace. And that's where they kind of were up until Altspace closed in 2023. And then when Failed to Render moved out of Altspace into like Meta Horizon Worlds and VRChat, Kyle and his girlfriend Casey have been, they practically run the club, right? Together. And they've been kind of they were handling at the time like the venues in there. So like you had like the Brainwash Comedy Club, which I mentioned earlier, right? It was kind of the predecessor to like my Brainwash Cafe. They put that together, and then we also had like a spaceship looking club that was kind of like used for like our secret Wednesday Patreon shows that we had at the time. So we did that there, and then outside of that, we in VRChat. Funny enough, it actually kind of goes into how I even knew about them in the first place. So like at the time I was still with, the virtual retail store. But, I hear, hey, this comedy club like wants to come in and like do like a show like at the store. And I'm like, well, really? A comedy show? Like, that sounds interesting, because funny enough, I was not really into stand-up comedy before that. Like I was just like, I was watching my wrestling and I was just doing my thing, watching YouTube, but I wasn't watching like stand-up shows or anything of the sort. So, I was just tasked with like, hey, make a set for them in the cafe. Because the store had like a little cafe that also sold pizza. But so so I created like a little basic like little corner stage that was like facing towards the main like store area, and then like I also had a bunch of chairs that were just like kind of centered, like they were kind of like pointing towards the stage, like almost. My pro wrestling setup like mindset was still kind of in my head because I was like, 'cause I didn't really know what like comedy clubs like looked like really. So I was just like, okay, stage, chairs going this way towards the stage, and then a microphone, right? I was like, yeah, it was really basic. And then, of course, I wanted to see my work in action, right? I wanted to see it being utilized for the show. So I started going to them, at least like in that store, right? I only went to those shows for a while. And then when I went after the first show, I was like, I can make the stage look just a little tiny better. So like I colored the curtain, I put the logo on the curtain as well, just so at least had a little bit of flair to it. And then I think I even put like neon lights like on the on the edges of like the I don't know, like the metal trims or whatever. So I made it look a little nice. And then eventually like it just kept evolving and evolving, and then we moved it to one of our other maps that was like a gas station at night. So we were doing it in the parking lot, right? And then one of our other developers actually kind of made like a set for it, and then I just kind of like took in like just kept improving it and like making it look even better. And then around that time I was starting to like make friends with like the people who were running it, right? And I got more ingrained into the community, and then Kyle's girlfriend was like, hey, like why don't you come to our Meta Horizon World shows? And I was kind of apprehensive about it because it's like, oh, Meta Horizons, because I've heard some, we've all seen the Zuckerberg like picture, like where he's in front of like, the Eiffel Tower, and it just looks so bad. And I was just like, oh, really? Like Meta Horizon World Zone? But I was like, you know what? Okay, I will go because I wanted to see the show, right? So I put that to the side, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go watch the show. And I enjoyed the show. It was good. I didn't, I wasn't a fan being in the platform, but I was like, you know what? Like, whatever. I had a good time in there. So I just kept going to the shows, and then I started going to all the shows. Funny enough, I think I only went to one of the Alt Space shows, like just once, and that was because, what was it? That particular net, it was actually supposed to be a show in the store, but the VRChat servers were having issues, and people just couldn't get on. So Kyle at the last minute was just like, you know what? Hey, screw it. Let's just go to Alt Space. So I was like, Alt Space, huh? Haven't heard that name in years. You know what I mean? Because again, if you remember, I mentioned that I went in like my cardboard gear VR. You know what I mean? So like I hadn't really seen what was going on since then. So I downloaded it on Steam because I hadn't played it in so long. I never played the PC version either. And then I just like was hastily like setting up like my avatar and like trying to get through the tutorial like as fast as possible, because you had to go through that. You had to go through the tutorial, and then I was like trying to find the club and get in there. And I was able to watch the show, and it was good. But little did I realize that the place that I was in, like the venue that I was in, would eventually come to VRChat, and and I'd end up kind of like taking charge of like developing it in a sense. So, they eventually did port it to VRChat, like I mentioned. And I was going to those shows in VRChat as well, and I was going through all the shows. So, let's just say years go by, right? And, this virtual store that I was at, they were going to VCAT, right? And since we were doing stuff together at the time, the person who ran it was like, hey, like we have a booth at VCAT. You guys want to do a show in there? And then it's like, yeah. So, we thought it was going to be cool and fun, but we soon encountered some issues that just kind of like made it not as fun. So the thing is, right, our audience is mostly comprised of Quest players. And because at the time, we were doing community booths for the store, those only get placed in PC worlds.
Yeah.
So you can start seeing the issues that were starting to arise. Because one, a lot of our regular audience members that would be at the shows couldn't be there, and then the other thing too was it limited the amount of options for comedians because we needed to get comedians that could play VRChat on their PC, and there was not many. There was
I
not
believe
many.
it.
We were lucky. We were lucky to have found like the ones that we did that did play or could play on PC. So, we tried doing it again the second time. Like it was slightly better, but like it was still kind of the same overall issues of like, I just couldn't fill it with a whole lot of people, and then like we didn't really have any control of like any systems, right? So like we didn't have any like voice amplifications, and we were doing it in a public world. We just had to hope that nobody was like bothering or like disrupting the show from like outside or whatever. So it was just we almost like we honestly almost considered like not doing it again after that. It was just like it just wasn't worth it because we weren't getting enough people going in, and then it was just difficult to find comedians. But fate almost kind of has a crazy way of pulling you back in. So with the store, like things just happened, and then like not so great things that kind of led to the implosion of that place. And then I kind of like looked at Filter and I was like, you know what? Like I'm already with this place. I was already putting more of my attention into this place anyway. So I'm just gonna just start being here full time, right? Like this is gonna be my place, or my group, whatever. But when that also happened, the crazy thing was Lun from VRChat, who you also interviewed on here, by the way. He messaged me, he DM'd me, and he told me he knew about what happened, right? And he actually gave me the opportunity to, essentially get Failed to Render and like just kind of take the place of the of the former virtual retail store that no longer existed, right? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, why not, right? Like, if I'm getting this opportunity, I may as well take it. You know what I mean? So, I essentially kind of became the representative for Filter Render over there for VRChat. And I ended up creating our community booth within maybe like a week or two. Got it done.
Fair enough.
Like it was a mostly basic booth, but like it was basically like our lobby, but like it took the space of the community booth, right? So it was a little wider, but like we had like the pictures of the comedians and like the neon lights and the bar and like our trophy that we won from Rain Dance. And it was just really cool. It definitely stood out from a lot of the booths there because you just have this large booth and it looks so realistic too. But
No,
it
one of the
was
bigger
just
ones.
optimized enough to work within the restrictions. You know what I mean? I mean, granted, the community booths are definitely a lot more lax, but still, like it looked really good for what it was. And then we started also doing shows with VRChat. So like our Thursday shows, which are usually at VRChat, and like we have our professional comedians. We're like, you know what? For those 2 weeks on those Thursdays, let's just do it at the VRChat like entrance stage, whatever it ended up being, right? I think the first year we tried doing that, the stage wasn't like properly well suited for what we were doing, so we couldn't do it there. Unfortunately, we had to move it to our main club. But the second time we did it, which was at Winter 2024, they saw what we did, right? Because they watched the show and they it's been like a year at that point. Like we were able to get in properly this time, like by me applying, right? So they knew what we were about at that point, and then they were able to make adjustments and like make tweaks so that you could use like an amplified microphone, which was one of the biggest things we needed. And we were able to actually do the shows there, like actually for real. Winter 2024, and it was just a lot of fun. It was I think we made a good impression. And hopefully we're lucky, hey, maybe we'll be at a Project Community Fest, doing same kind of thing over there. So we'll see. But I think we've gone a long way since then.
No, absolutely. Which I mean, if y'all are watching this, because this should be coming out mid-March ish. Project Fest signups for 2025 are still live and are live until I believe May 12th. Post editor, feel free to correct me on that if I'm wrong, but you have until May 12th. You should sign up now. You should technically signed up, when it first released. But if you haven't heard about it already, go sign up for Project Fest if you're interested in showcasing your communities or booths. You forced me to do a tangent, but fair enough. No, but
My bad.
no, you're good. Well, no, that's and hopefully, yeah, like because I know you said you had applied for not only failed to render, but also yourself. So hopefully you both get accepted as well. Um,
Yeah.
you know, knock on wood. We'll come back to this whenever the episode releases. But
Yeah.
but no, that's what's up, man. I'll say so. One of the questions I want to ask, since you've been with failed to render for a little bit now, and you've been to a bunch of those shows and whatnot. What's like one of the most iconic shows that you have been to? Like, what's one of the most memorable moments from one of the shows that you've been to?
So honestly, I think the most memorable thing that we done was when we did our special with FIA, the virtual reality show. That was just like insane because I had like such a production quality and like polish, and it's just like wow, like this is amazing. You know what I mean? I even got to do a little like intermission bit like in the middle, so like I actually got to be involved one way or another. So that was cool. And we did in front of a lot of people because I mean, if you've seen some of her events that they run here, like they are huge, right? And the one that we did with them was no exception. So that to me, honestly, was probably the most iconic show we've done up to this point. At least it's the most iconic thing I can remember. It was just being there, seeing the huge audience, seeing Fia enjoying herself, and like even like like saying what she needed to say in the beginning and the end. But it was, and we brought some great comedians too that night. And then after that, I think Kyle and one of our performers, Reznov, who he does like musical comedy improv. It's kind of like Reggie Watts, you know what I mean? But he has his own spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
But like they did like an interview with her at the end on her, I guess like talk show set. And that was cool to watch as well. And then after that, they just did like an after party. It was fun. Like I'm like the only thing that's close to maybe topping would have been like what we did at VRChat this winter. Like that was cool as well.
Fair enough. Well, that's what's up, man. And obviously, while you're doing, Nintendo modding and, your world development and working
Yeah.
with Fail to Render, you also are working on your own like assets that are on like Gumroad and stuff. Because I
Yeah.
believe the only one that's currently on there, I believe, is your mic system, which we'll throw a picture of
Yeah.
that on the screen. But
Yeah.
I guess kind of what made you want to go from like world development into like asset development?
Well, I saw the stuff that I made and I kind of realized, there might be people that might be interested in using this, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like I don't necessarily just want to give it out for free because like, I'm kind of in a state where like I need to make some money, right? And getting jobs is not necessarily easy either. At least for me.
Felt that.
Yeah. So I thought, you know what, if I put something out that might be useful for some people, like there might be people that are willing to buy it. So, and the mic system was already done, right? So I just needed to make it a little more modular, like not as integrated, and like just make it so you could just drop it in the world and then that's it, you were done, you know what I mean? So, funny enough, this kind of goes into a story like being at VRChat like for the first time, like not like as part of Fail to Render, I started networking with a lot of people, and one of the people that I met was DX30, who was someone you've also interviewed on here. I got to know him, and I got to know a lot of his friends that are also part of this group called Polygon. They make a lot of amazing avatars, and not necessarily avatars I would wear because I'm not really a furry, but I respect what they do. And the work that they put on their avatars, it's just massive respect. So I've gotten to know a lot of them, and they encouraged me like, hey, why not put this stuff for sale? You know what I mean? Like it seems useful enough. Funny enough, even recently, at least at the time of this recording, they even mentioned like, hey, we'll even help you record some videos that you could put on the page for it so that it looks more attractive, right? And I was like, oh, you guys. You know what I mean? I appreciate them. Appreciate you guys if you're watching this. But so I want to start making useful things that people might want to use in their world. Like, for example, the next thing that I'm making is I have a voice system that I made. That's you can only hear people in certain zones. You can also have a main area that's like designated as like the main zone that you can hear people like regardless of where you're at. And I just want to be able to, so you could just drag drop it in. You can drag like new zones in, and like even like multiple of the same zones. So like even if you go between them, like it's still like nothing really changes. Like you're just in that zone, right? But I just want to make it just simple and easy to use, so that and I imagine this one might appeal more to people just because it's like you don't necessarily need to use it in like a live event sort of context, right? Like you could use it in like chill worlds where it's like maybe you want separate rooms and you just want to like talk to people. And like this is something I'm definitely gonna have to do more research on myself, like to see like what kind of existing assets there are that you could buy or just even get for free. That exist out there for this sort of things, and see what those things offer, and like maybe think like what could I add to this that might make it worth it to buy, right? Could it be like how easy it is to set up the features, that sort of support, right? In case something goes wrong. You might not necessarily get that if you're getting something that's free, right? Because it's like, well, I'm not getting any money from this, so it's like I can't. I gotta put my time to other stuff. So, but it's like if people are buying this, it's like, okay, well, I mean, at least I got something out of it, right? So it's like I'm willing to at least like provide some support for it. So I just want to make stuff that'll like be useful for people, be worth their money, and just hopefully just have a lot of uses that maybe I didn't even think about, right? Depending on how they use it. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to do with my Gumroad sword. I did have a VCat store, but at the time of this recording, they are shutting that down. So unfortunately I did not get to use that long enough to see anyone buy my stuff there with. But I also have a booth store, though I'm still setting that up for people that would prefer to buy on there, But other than that, I mean, yeah, I'm just looking to expand my catalog and see what useful things I can make for people.
No, fair enough. Well, that's cool, man. Like, it's definitely crazy how much you do, in general, because obviously not every world creator is a good asset creator, vice versa, and so on and so forth. So to see you kind of go into different types of creation, even outside of VR, it's pretty crazy to say the least. Um, I guess kind of because we are running a little bit out of time. This did not feel like an hour, but I guess one of the things I want to ask, more of a like, if you could give a piece of advice to somebody who's interested in kind of doing what you're doing, whether it's like world creation or stuff like that. What is one piece of advice you can give to them for maybe someone who's just wanting to start?
Yeah. So honestly, like if you want to do like world development stuff or even just like asset stuff, like what I did to really like improve like my skills is like, of course, watch as many resources on like YouTube, for like modeling, texturing. But even outside of that, like just play some video games, you know what I mean? Like you can play some older games. Like I mainly was playing a lot of Half-Life 2 and like Gary's mod, just so like I could explore some maps, like just to look closely and see like, hey, how did Valve put this together, right? Or even some newer stuff like Counter-Strike 2, like it's like their newest, one of their newer games, right? So I was looking through that and I was like, wow, like this, it's like it was starting to make sense in my head. So it's like, okay, like how can I replicate these things with my workflows, or maybe even find more efficient, better workflows? But like honestly, like just keep going at it, if you feel like giving up, don't, because like even for me, like I feel like I kind of have imposter syndrome. I'm kind of like, man, like how did I get here? You know what I mean? like honestly, the biggest thing with that was I was recently at what was it, a Press Your Luck event hosted by GS Genesis at VCat, and I was like sitting next to like Chris Connie, and I was like sitting next to like Midnights and Valhalla, and I was just like sitting there as like one of the contestants, and I was like, how did I get here? You know what I mean? Like even though it's like I definitely appreciate it, but I was like, man, like these guys do some amazing stuff, you know what I mean? It's like I just make worlds. But honestly, like even if you are dealing with something like that, just know that like just keep going at it. Your work will show for yourself, and people will recognize you for your work, and just honestly, all I can really say is just keep going at it, and don't let any of that stuff get you down, and learn as much as you can. That's even I still go by that now.
No, hands down, some solid advice overall. Dude, Pablo, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Like, this was a blast, kind of to get
Thanks for having me on, man. This has been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was great to get to learn about you a little bit more and kind of deep dive a little bit into your stuff. Well, before we do
Yeah.
end everything off, of course, I do want you to tell the people where they can find you, any links you want on the screen in the description. But yeah, go ahead and tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like on all the social or at least most of them. I'm on like Twitter. You can find me like on Blue Sky. I have a YouTube channel. I even have a GitHub if you want to see any of my any open source projects that I've contributed to. You can come to my worlds. I mean, that's probably one of the places you'll find me at the most is either my worlds or fail to render. So there you go.
Fair enough. Simple but to the point. But well, no, man. Of course,
That's how
like
I be,
go check out the Gumroad too as well. Go get that mic system. Pretty nice. You didn't hear that from me though. But well, nah, man, dude, it was such a pleasure to have you on, and
thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
It was fun.
With that, ladies, gentlemen, everybody inside and outside the ballpark, that has been it for episode 54. Yes, of the Noved Notes podcast. But yeah, if you liked what we talked about, feel free to smack that like button, comment down below. What's your favorite type of comedy? Because why not? We've been talking about comedy for the past, 20, 30 minutes. Yep. What's your favorite type of comedy? Comment down below. And of course, if you're already checking out some of the other episodes, why not hit that subscribe button? You're already coming back anyway.
Do it.
But with that, I want to thank you all one last time for watching, listening, depending on what platform you're on. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care and peace.
Will you?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Noved.